Thank you, Noel. Whoa. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, maybe too much. Yeah. All right, so the genesis of my talk tonight is I wanted to focus on two of my interests. One clear interest is around artificial intelligence. I love reading about it. I love learning all about the applications of it, but more importantly, the implications, thinking through, what will the future look like if all this stuff comes to bear, this next inflection point. But my second interest in love is, this is just dad night here. This is my son Henry. I have a 2-year-old son, Henry. And like any parent, I think about his future. I wonder what the world will look like when he's my age. Thank you, Noel, for freaking us out about the environment. But what will the planet look like when he's my age? Will he ever need a driver's license? I don't know. As a 2-year-old today, would he? And more importantly, will he be upset when he finds out I use him in every single one of my talks? Just milking it. So it's those two interests of artificial intelligence and the love for my son that I crafted this talk tonight. And as I'm going through this, hopefully you can think of maybe your own child or a niece or a nephew or a cousin to help frame it. So it turns out, as I was doing research, I'm not the only one that has these considerations that are doing research on it. UNICEF, which is the branch of the United Nations that's focused on children's rights around the world, they've been putting out reports and doing studies all about this. I have a link at the end, you can look at this, but they look at both the opportunities and then also the risks. For tonight, just because of the time, I'm going to focus on privacy, safety, and security and how it has to do with children and AI. So, just to baseline it here, I know you probably all know about this, but so artificial intelligence, the ability of a computer program or machine to think and learn. And in order for it to be successful, there are 3 things that need to be in there. 1, it needs a task or something that we're asking it to complete. 2, it needs some sort of algorithm or parameters or series of steps in order to reach that task. And most importantly, it needs a lot of data. It needs a lot of data in order to get to this, to be effective. So where does that data come from? It's us, it's our behavior, it's all of our clicks and searches and movements and everything else, every data point. And that data is incredibly valuable. We are like a modern day, all of us, we're kind of like Neo in the Matrix, but rather than our heat and our energy coming out that's powering these big machines, it's all of our behavior, all of our online behavior. Just looking at the value of different companies, you can see that it makes sense that they call this modern day oil or data. So if you look at the value of ExxonMobil, which is the multinational oil corporation, they are dwarfed by the value of Facebook and Google that are just based on collecting this data. So it's a very, very valuable resource. So there's a design ethicist named Tristan Harris who looks out into the future quite a bit. And he talks about as this AI continues to become more powerful and all these tools we have, there's going to be a point where it overwhelms our human capabilities. So it can do way more than we can now. But more importantly, before that, it can overwhelm human vulnerabilities. So it'll know us better than we know ourselves, and then it can be used for whatever reason that way. Now, when I think of Henry and I think of him right now, what is he if not a walking vulnerability? Just children generally. They don't know a lot just by virtue of being children. And there have been some researchers that have been interested in exploring children and tech and their relationship with it specifically. So at MIT, they did a study called, "Hey Google, is it okay if I eat you?" And they had a bunch of kids interact with various smart speakers and just play with them and talk to them. And at the ending, there were questionnaires. And they would ask questions like, how much do you trust this smart speaker? And a majority of them said, yeah, they have a good amount of trust for them. And then they said, is this thing smarter than you? And in some cases, 100% of the kids said, yeah, this disembodied thing is smarter than I am. So already, without understanding these systems, there's a certain amount of authority that this smart speaker is being given by these children. Next one, another study I thought was really interesting is there are these, it's called the Asch conformity experiments. These are like Psych 101. And what happens, the way it works is it's presented as if it's like a perception test, and they present one line to the participants, and then they present 3 more, and they say, which ones are the same? We're testing your perception. But really what they're doing, this is one of the original photos from the original test, all of these guys are in on it, except for this guy. So they're just testing that guy to see what he does when everyone else makes a decision. So if they knowingly choose the wrong choice, will he do it too? Will he go along with the peer pressure? Here he is he's second guessing his choice. Well, as it turns out, a very large majority of people would make a decision they know was wrong because everyone else was. They recreated this with kids and robots, and the kids, every time, they would go along with the robots. Adults wouldn't fall for it, but kids would every time. So this other example of, is this shorting in and out a little bit? No? It's okay? Or is it just me in my head? So just to put all this together, we have these children who are inherently trusting of tech and therefore vulnerable and putting their authority into something they don't understand. We have children are valuable sources of data, and AI need large amounts of data to be effective. So you put all this and you package it in the attention economy and the free market, and what could possibly go wrong, right? Well, let's look at an example of where it does go wrong. UNICEF also put out another report, and they did zoom in on a few places where these risks come up, and one in particular was around YouTube and children. So for those of you, maybe you've heard of it, there's 400 hours of footage uploaded to YouTube a minute. And there's close to 2 billion monthly unique users. So it's a behemoth, right? We all know what it is. And what makes it so powerful is, in a white paper a few years ago, they explained their recommendation algorithm and how it is that they service up all the different content that we're seeing on YouTube. And an interesting stat I read when doing it is 70% of YouTube videos that are viewed online are from recommendations. So if there's 1 billion viewed in a day, 700 million of them are viewed because YouTube says you should, not because someone actually went there for it. I've been guilty of that, where I go to look for one video and then suddenly I'm down the rabbit hole. All right, so some more stats about YouTube to get us back to the point here. 81% of parents let their children watch videos on YouTube. It's fine, this talk isn't about shaming around screen time, but it's just an interesting stat that is coupled with, in the same study, 61% of those parents said they encountered content they thought was unsuitable for children. So we've got this algorithm that's suggesting things, a lot of kids watching it, and it's taking them to unsavory places. Now, looking at the risks of YouTube and AI and kids, I'm going to look at it from two angles. One is from the inside of YouTube itself. YouTube does its best to keep bad content, inflammatory content away from children, but as a lot of reports will point out, stuff will get right past it. There was a study done by, I believe it was Cornell, just in May here, where they did this, they called them random walks, where they would just launch a kid's video, and then see how long through autoplay it would take before they got to some weird places. They found in 3% of the time, within 10 videos, they're being showed things that should not be in front of kids. And here's Mickey Mouse doing God knows what down here in the corner. But these have 5 million views that are there, and they take them there. 3% doesn't sound like a lot, but then at scale, that is quite a few. Now, as I was going further into the research, you find that the ones that are marked as disturbing, the videos, are often like the famous characters that are doing things they shouldn't be, yet they stay on, they're still there. So here we have Spider-Man and Elsa, Paw Patrol lost someone on duty, and then just see if you can see what's off in this video.
Is delivering a parcel to Pepper's house.
Look, I just got a parcel in the post. Can anyone guess what's inside? Dinosaur.
Oh, George.
It's a
Sniper rifle.
It's out of nowhere. So these actually are quite tame compared to all the other things that I saw out there that were on YouTube and YouTube Kids. There's something called ElsaGate a few years ago, which is all about this horrific stuff that's out on YouTube that is, again, the algorithms are being gamed and they're getting in front of kids. And I'm just going to show this for a second, but there's some really gross stuff out there. And the thing is, though, the way that these are created and the way the titles are written, the whole system is being used in order to get them in front of kids. Way more views, more inflammatory, more data, it keeps going. It's this crazy cycle. So if I think of, as a kid, kind of the pedagogically sound of work of Jim Henson or Mr. Rogers, it was modern. It was, I think of their work as being much different, obviously. And here's Jeff, oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind here. Here's Mr. Rogers actually speaking on the subcommittee for communications back 50 years ago about what he does.
We deal with such things as the inner drama of childhood. We don't have to bop somebody over the head to make drama on the screen. We deal with such things as getting a haircut.
So if you think of his work and you put it compared to Crazy Town ElsaGate, the algorithm is set up to, as many of you may have guessed, to benefit ElsaGate work. So there's one side of the coin that's quite troubling about this form of AI. So now let's look at it from the outside in of how the algorithm can be a risk to children. There was another study, other research that was done, that if someone were to go onto YouTube and were to search, let's say, girls on spring break or something, like girls in bikinis, that would be their first video. The same algorithm, to keep people watching, would go down and down, and sadly, the videos that were suggested in an autoplay would be of younger and younger and younger girls, to the point where, as this woman found out, it would be videos of children in like their pools in their backyard, in their swimsuits, that are being served up as the next thing from YouTube. So as I was doing this research and just reading about it, I started to feel like those Facebook moderators we hear about, that it's just like traumatic to even hear this stuff. I actually had bad dreams while doing this research. It's just really, really troubling, really troubling. However, is this AI successful? Yeah, user engagement's up, all sorts of data to go back into the system, ad revenue through the roof. But is this safe for children? Does it respect their privacy? Does it respect their safety? Does it respect their security? I would argue possibly not. All right, so what? This is one example in this big behemoth. What can you actually do? So back to UNICEF, they've started something called Generation AI, where they've been having these meetups and all these get-togethers and discussions with other researchers to say, what can we do? What thought leadership can we put out into the world to help curb this? To their credit, any time that there was an article that I read about YouTube, and they linked to a video of saying, like, here's an offender, it was taken down. So the importance of journalism and the fourth estate to go out there and find this stuff, to clamp down the algorithm, is really, I think, a very important part of it. The government does have one weapon. It's known as the COPPA, the Children Online Privacy Protection Act. And it's used to fine people that are taking kids' data or doing any of the stuff we talked about. So TikTok just got the biggest fine ever of $5.7 million for collecting data on kids under 13. So there are tools out there, but these laws have been set up before YouTube, and a lot of these things were even there, and they're woefully outdated. This was just a few weeks ago while doing my research. This was in the same subcommittee where Mr. Rogers spoke, so I'm just going to play this.
Good morning. I want to thank everyone for being here today to examine the use of persuasive technologies on internet platforms.
So they are having these talks in Senate, and one of the speakers that was brought in, one of the experts, is a guy named Tristan Harris. Again, I really admire him. And he was asked this question by the senator from Nebraska.
Protect ourselves and our privacy, and what role does the federal government have to play in this?
Right. So
how do we keep our kids safe?
There's so much to that. I think what we need is a mass public awareness campaign so people understand what's going on.
So I'd like to think tonight is one part of that, getting us all thinking about it. But also this guy, he's great, he's really worth following. He actually has a podcast. This morning's episode was about the YouTube algorithm, so I felt very relevant as I listened to it. There's other people out there. This woman, Dr. Mary Aiken, she has a lot of great thinking that she's talking about it. MIT has started their own curriculum to go into middle schools to teach how these algorithms work so that they can make children more conscientious consumers. But finally, we're at IXDA, so what can we do if we're ever in that situation? We at Digitas have something called, we talk about thinking beyond the artboard. So it's thinking about designing not just for a sketch file to be passed off for a website, but rather what does it look like in voice, in AR, in VR, whatever it might be. And in all of my reading and the different places I've been, it seems like UX is going to be more and more important and involved in crafting those algorithms down the line. And I think there's a real need for us to be bringing human-centered AI, which is a term that Stanford is using for a program they're starting up, where we apply these same user-centered, human-centered principles to crafting the algorithms, to consider if what we're creating is explainable so people understand how we're getting to that point, that they're fair, and then that they're secure. There's a quote by Nelson Mandela I really like, and it is, "There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children." And I think this is an excellent opportunity to show what our industry values in the way that we create and we design. And if it comes to the point where you're thinking of designing for possibly children, and he needs some sort of persona or some way to think about it, just for a second, just consider my son Henry.